But I thank you for inviting me, and I thank you for your commitment to agriculture. It's really very, very important. And we all understand that ag is our #1 industry, and 1 in 3 jobs in Nebraska depend on agriculture, and it needs to stay that way. It should be that way, and it needs to stay profitable. And we're just very fortunate the way that it's gone for the most part in the last several years, because our financial position in Nebraska is what it is really because of agriculture. And I like to share this. This is a couple of years old, but it gives you an idea of the way we generally do things in Nebraska. First of all, we have a balanced budget. Secondly, we don't spend money that we don't have. And we have a cash reserve, and the purpose of a cash reserve is for a rainy day fund, so that when things run short, you've still got some money to go on. That's what we've done the last couple of years. And as the revenue has picked up a bit, we need to restore that cash reserve before we go on and start spending money on new projects. But CNN did a survey, and they looked at per capita state debt. Per capita state debt. Well, that's a list that compares you to other states, and you'd like to be 50th. We are 50th. And at that time, our per capita state debt was $15. Now that amounts to about $25 million for entire state debt. And I think that's probably some obligations to our state retirement fund. I don't know what else it would be. But keep in mind that that's the position that we're in, 50th. The next state is Iowa at $75. Illinois is about 30th or someplace at $2,600 per capita. California has 37.2 million people, and their per capita state debt is $3,000. Compare that to 15. Now, that's a fact that we really need to get out there and let people understand and know, because if you're running a business and you're thinking about expanding, or if you're in a state that is so choked down by debt that you got to think sooner or later they're coming after everything else I've got, Nebraska would be the place to be. And I think we do need to do a better job of marketing that and some other things that we have about Nebraska that we should be very, very proud of. In this session that's going to start on Wednesday, I've mentioned some issues that I'm certain we're going to discuss. I'll quickly go through those, and then I'll focus a little bit more on agriculture. But certainly we'll be dealing with the 2-year budget, because this is our long session of 90 days, which takes us about to the 1st of June. And so we'll have the 2-year budget. This is the year that the tax kicks in, the 1/4% sales tax, not an increase, but setting aside 1/4% of the funds from the sales tax for roads, which should amount to $50 or $60 million. That's going to be a challenge, because if we don't have an increase in revenue, then the rest of the state agencies are going to have to adjust their budgets proportionally by that amount. So it's a challenge. But we've got to have good roads in Nebraska. Most people understand that. And certainly if any of you have a brainstorm or a light bulb on how we could better fund our roads, I'm all ears. I'd like to hear that, because we've just got to do it. And gas tax is not getting the job done. And we're all focusing on vehicles that give us more miles per gallon, use less fuel, use electricity, but those vehicles that use electricity still drive on the roads. So it's the same impact whether you're using gas or electricity, but we're not funding it the right way, and it's not working out very well. So that's a real challenge for us. Another thing that's going to deserve some discussion is state aid to schools. And we have a situation in Nebraska. We have 250 some school districts in Nebraska. I think in this coming year, half of them will not get any state aid. No state aid. That's because their property values are high enough that property tax is funding all of their education. Now, I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's a good way to have things, and I think that somehow we've got to deal with that, because all those districts that are funding their own education, those citizens are paying sales and income tax into the state of Nebraska. But all their sales and income taxes are being redistributed to other school districts. And it may be as much psychological as anything, but somehow I wish we had a better way of determining state aid so that everybody could share in it, and we wouldn't have this situation. And nobody likes additional property tax. I served on the school board for 8 years, and I know as we would look at those property values and they would go up, you kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Well, if nothing else, we're going to have a few more dollars this year, but we all know what's happened to land values, including, of course, irrigated land. And too much of our educational system is being funded by property tax. So we need to talk about that. We're going to have some issues on water and how to fund water. I'll get back to that in a little bit. And, of course, agricultural issues. Now, another thing that will be very apparent, although it wasn't a great number, we had 9 senators term limited out, and 6 of them were committee chairs. And as it turns out, we've got 10 new senators coming in, and Senator Chambers is coming back. So that's going to be a story in itself. That's the story I'm going to repeat here in a minute or two about Senator Chambers. So we're also going to have some new leadership, because even people that are coming back that aren't new and weren't term limited out have made decisions to run as chairs of other committees. And I've been chair of the Ag Committee for 4 years. I think I've been a strong advocate for agriculture, and I hope that I'm perceived that way. And since it is our #1 industry, but we all know that water is the lifeblood of agriculture. And so I've chosen to run for chair of natural resources because water is a part of that. It's an important part of it. Power is another important part of natural resources. And so those are issues that very definitely and directly impact agriculture. Natural Resource Committee meets 3 days a week, and the Ag Committee met 1 day a week. So it is additional responsibility to go from a 1-day committee to 3. I do have an opponent, and that's Senator Christensen, and so he and I will give our speech on Wednesday morning, and we'll see where that ends up. But I'm taking a risk. I got a nice office where the Ag office is, and many of you know where that is. Great location. So either way, I'm out of that office. And I'll be looking for something else on Wednesday, and I hope it's the Natural Resource office, but we'll have to wait and see. And Senator Chambers is coming back. I was able to serve my first 2 years when he was in the legislature. And I found him to be one of the very smartest, most brilliant people I've ever met. He could also be so terribly frustrating and argumentative, and you can get so mad at him, but he is smart. And I remember the first year specifically, and it'll be interesting to see if he does it again this year when he comes back, but in my first year, a very few days into the session, he decided to pick out a veteran senator and really get all over him. Show us new people, because there were 23 of us that came in at the same time. Show these new people, you better be careful when you get up to speak. And I mean, it was so bad, I just wanted to look down. I didn't want to look at the poor guy that he was all over. And I thought, now, what's going to happen the first time I get up to speak? And everybody had to think that and be afraid of it, whether they would admit it or not, because he could just turn you around if he wanted to. So I learned in the next few days that he grew up, he was the son of a minister, an evangelical pastor. And at one time, he really had strong Bible beliefs. And he was brought up by his dad, and he learned the Bible. Well, the Bible's very important to me. And I thought, when I get down here to the legislature, I don't think I'm going to have very many opportunities to talk about spiritual things on the floor of the legislature. Well, Senator Chambers did. And he would quote Jesus accurately whenever he wanted to, and use the Bible to make a point on debate. And then he'd turn around and make fun of it, because at some point in time in his life, he decided none of it was true. And just would be puzzling. Well, about 10 days into the 90-day session, We were arguing the bill or debating the bill on smoke-free Nebraska, and I think most of us are pretty pleased that smoke-free Nebraska became law. And he was arguing for the bill and doing a good job of it. But in the process, he referred to the Bible as the Bibble, and several times he called it the Bibble. And I thought, this is one thing, but it's going to be something else. We're 10 days into a 90-day session. I don't want to sit here 80 more days and listen to this. So I hit my white light to speak, because you got to hit the white light when you're going to speak, and you don't get up until you're recognized. And I jotted some notes and waited until I was called. And Senator Carlson, you're recognized to speak. Got up and I said, Mr. President, members of the legislature, before I address this bill, I want to address Senator Chambers. And he was behind me and to my left. So I turned and I looked at him and I said, Senator Chambers, I read the Bible. I believe the Bible. I kept saying Bible. I believe the Bible is truth. And because it tells me in there what Christ did for me, when I leave this world, I know where I'm going. And I'm actually looking forward to the trip. And then I turned and looked at him again. And I said, but until that time, I'd appreciate it if you'd refer to it as the Bible. And then I went on and complimented him for the way he was debating the smoke-free Nebraska bill, and I made my comments on the bill, and I sat down. And I could see his light, and I looked around, his light is on. And it was getting toward noon, and so pretty soon, Senator Chambers, you're recognized to speak. And I thought, oh boy, here it comes. Mr. President and members of the legislature, before I address this bill, I want to address Senator Carlson. And our chairs turned, so I turned and looked at him, and I thought, here it comes. He said, he could have really nailed me. But he said, Senator Carlson, there's tomato and there's tomato. There's potato and there's potato. There's Bible, there's Bibble. And he went on and talked about the smoking bill. Oh, I breathed a sigh of relief, and I thought that was his way of saying, I may not agree with you, but I kind of like what you're doing. So that opened the door for me, and a lot of times during that session I would get up and oppose him on things related to the Bible, and he liked that. But at any rate, then it was noon, and we were invited, all of us invited to a luncheon over at the Cornhusker, and he never would go to any of those because he's not going to be obligated to anyone. You'd never see him at any kind of a luncheon or dinner. And we're only 10 days into the session. I'm getting to know these other people, and I'd gotten to know Senator Whiteman from Lexington, and he and I walked over to the Cornhusker together. And we get over there, and Speaker Flood came up to me. I didn't even know him very well at that point, just getting acquainted with him. But he came over to us, and he said, man alive, he said, when you turned and looked at him and said, after this, I'd appreciate it if you'd refer to it as the Bible. I'm going to say what he said. He said, I didn't say it out loud, but I thought to myself, oh shit. It's going to hit the fan now. And it didn't happen. So I developed, I can't say that Senator Chambers is a friend. You wouldn't dare say that. But he respected me because I was willing to confront him. And that's the way he is. If you don't agree with him, but you get up and speak, and he thinks you put some thought into what you're saying, he'll accept that. And so that's the way it went. Now, he's a great guy if you want to have a bill defeated. There's nobody better at defeating a bill than Senator Chambers. But if it's your bill, that's not much fun. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he plugs himself in, because certainly the legislature has changed in the 4 years that he's been out. And a lot of new people, and I can name several of them that aren't going to back down. So in addition to the difficult issues that we're going to deal with, there's going to be some interesting sparring that occurs on the floor, and we'll see where that takes us. Well, in agriculture, I've got a couple of bills to talk about that is going to come before the Ag Committee, and we'll see where that goes. We do have a bill, because we've met with groups, and some of you have been involved in these meetings, dealing with animal welfare. And the bill is more a procedure that should be followed on a complaint about the way livestock may be treated, or an observation that somebody makes. And we want a law that would enable law enforcement and county officials to get involved to try and solve a problem and know where to go to where to ask for help. And I think that should be the Department of Ag. Because if there is a situation where there's a welfare problem with animals, I think the Department of Ag needs to be aware of it. And then there would always be the possibility of a disease problem in a situation, and certainly they need to be aware of that because that's part of their responsibility. Law enforcement, I believe, and county attorneys and anyone that at the county level, if they knew excuse me, who they are to contact when they've got a problem like this, and I think it should be the Department of Ag, then we've got a system, and the purpose in that system wouldn't be to go out and seize animals. It would first of all try to come to an understanding with the owner. If there is a problem here, what do you need to get it fixed? Let's get it fixed so you can keep your animals, but let's fix the problem. And certainly part of this is so that we don't get the Humane Society of the United States involved. We don't need them in Nebraska. We don't want them in Nebraska. They're not good for our economy. They're not good for agriculture. They're not good for livestock producers. They're a pain in the neck. And we don't have to have that here because we'll take care of our own situation. And Michelle involved with We Support Agriculture, and Farm Bureau's involved, and pork producers are involved, and several groups that understand and know we need to have our own way of solving our own problems and solving it in the right way so they don't have any ground to work under. And so this will be a bill that should involve some interesting conversation because I think it's got a good purpose in it. The Corn Board would like to move to a position where they're a quasi-government agency instead of a government agency. And I think there's going to be a bill that outlines that and brings that forth. I think if this kind of thing would happen, or if it's entertained, but certainly part of the discussion would be, and the desire would be for the Corn Board, and then this could flow over to other grain groups as well. But I think they'll be primarily the one in this bill. That the process should change from a governor-appointed board to a producer-elected board. And I think most producers would like that idea. Another concept is that there should be in it the right of a producer to ask for a refund on the checkoff. And the thought is this, by the Corn Board and many corn producers, that if they are elected by the producers and spend the money on something that a lot of producers don't like, and there's a lot of requests for refunds, there's two things that are going to happen. It's not going to look good if there's a lot of requests for refunds. Second thing is, when the next election comes around, those that are on it are going to be gone. And so it's more direct participation by the producers than what we have right now. And I think that part of the idea is good. The challenge is, if you move out from under the government in terms of oversight, there's some concern that the First Amendment might be violated, because if you pay a check off and I pay a check off, and I don't like the way that money is spent, it's my money that I gave, and you're spending it, and you're not supporting my views. So my First Amendment's violated. And I don't know how good a case that is, but that's some of the concern, and it's less likely to happen if it's not a quasi-government agency. So again, it'll be good, interesting discussion, and we'll see where that goes. Another bill that I think is going to come forward is one that we have brand inspection in Nebraska, and I think brand inspection serves a good purpose. Knox County is split. Part of the county is in brand inspection and part of it isn't. And there's going to be a bill that would remove the entire county of Knox County from the brand inspection rules. And it could have moved to include them all in it, but this bill is to exempt them from brand inspection. And again, it'll be another interesting discussion about the purpose of brand inspection and where we need to go with it. I'm going to touch a little bit on water. Water is the lifeblood of agriculture, but it's not only the lifeblood of agriculture. And if we look at this past year, all the groundwater that was pumped in the state of Nebraska because of drought, it kept farming profitable. But it is so scary to think that in 2013, if we don't get moisture, now we're going to start the planting season with no moisture in the profile. And so if we would have another year this year like last year, there's going to be even more groundwater pumped. And in a few parts of the state last summer, there were some domestic wells that went dry. Well, it doesn't take very many of those to have that happen to, and all of a sudden we could almost have a revolution on our hands. Because water is so important to agriculture. It's the lifeblood of industry in Nebraska. It's the lifeblood of municipalities. It's the lifeblood of people that have their own domestic wells. And it's the lifeblood of recreational opportunities that include water. So every group has a vital interest in our water resources. And we have the most wonderful water resource in the United States, in the Ogallala Aquifer. Texas has not managed theirs very well. They've pumped it down. Oklahoma has done the same thing. Parts of Kansas, even though they bicker with us over the Republican River, they've done the same thing. And we have a little bit, but we've still got a wonderful supply, and we've got to manage that supply in such a way that not only next year, but 15 and 20 and 50 and 100 years from now, our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren still have water for all the purposes that it's necessary in the state of Nebraska in addition to agriculture. And not if we do that, but when we do that, then in the future, agriculture is going to be in an even better position than other states to bring in wealth to the state, because we have the water, but we can't squander it. And we have some areas of the state where groundwater depletions, I believe, are serious. They need to be addressed, and so we've got to deal with that. So that's not to keep people from irrigating, because we need to do that. At the same time, I've seen in my 6 years in the legislature where various parts of the state that irrigate have really changed their ideas in terms of how much water they need. Steve, I don't think you use as much water today as you did 6 years ago. And they learn very well. They're creative, and but we've never had the pressure on great enough that it's an absolute essential that you've got to ratchet down what you're using, because our supply is limited. It's not unlimited. And so I think that water management is so important, and therefore water funding is important. And I think that we probably need to work toward about the same amount of money for water funding that we do for roads. That would be another 0.25% of the sales tax, not necessarily to increase it, but that's the kind of money we need. And what I've talked about in water, I would hope that you would agree with me that the water issue is a statewide issue. It's not just the farmers. It's a statewide issue. And therefore the state needs to step forward and be willing to support the efforts that we put forth to conserve our water and to keep it in a position that it can be helpful for our economy. So these are things that we're dealing with. It's going to be an interesting session. As I've talked to groups before, I say that, and some of you here today had an opportunity to vote for me. So you gave me this opportunity to serve in the legislature, and it's been one of the most interesting and satisfying things I've ever done. And part of that is because we're a group of 49 people, and for the most part we're bipartisan. We work together. But in a group of 49 people, one person can make a difference, and that's the satisfying part of serving. If I was in Congress and in the House, 435 people, just imagine what 1 out of 435 must feel like. It would be pretty frustrating. But in our system, it's different. And so it's been a real privilege to represent you.